The Galactic Institute floated in perpetual orbit around the neutral moon of Academia 7, a carefully selected rock that belonged to no one and therefore offended everyone equally. It was, by all accounts, the most prestigious educational facility in known space. A glittering monument to interspecies cooperation, intellectual excellence, and the sort of casual arrogance that only comes from being surrounded by the supposed best and brightest the galaxy had to offer. The Institute's founding charter, written in 17 languages and 3 forms of interpretive dance, proclaimed its noble mission to foster understanding between species, to advance scientific knowledge, and to prove that yes, your species could absolutely sit in a room with that species without starting another war. Mostly. The success rate hovered around 73%, which the administration considered a rousing victory. Students from 462 different worlds attended the Institute, each species convinced that their particular evolutionary path had gifted them with intellectual superiority. The Vorthians believed their 4 brains made them natural philosophers. The Keltharians insisted their hive-mind connection provided unparalleled collaborative ability. The Xinthians claimed their mathematical crystalline thought processes rendered them the galaxy's premier logicians. Everyone had a theory about why they were special, and most of those theories involved explaining why everyone else was slightly less evolved. Into this cosmic academic thunderdome had stumbled humanity, approximately 15 years prior, with all the grace of a drunk uncle at a wine tasting. The human species had barely mastered faster-than-light travel when they knocked on the galactic community's door, grinning and waving and completely oblivious to the fact that most civilizations spent a few centuries lurking in the cosmic shadows before announcing themselves. Humanity had gone from splitting atoms to splitting space-time in what the rest of the galaxy considered an absolutely reckless time frame, then promptly asked if anyone wanted to be friends. The Galactic Council, in a moment of what historians would later describe as either admirable open-mindedness or catastrophic judgment, had agreed to allow human students into the Institute on a trial basis. The general consensus was that humans would either prove themselves adequate or would wash out spectacularly, providing entertaining cautionary tales either way. It was a win-win scenario for everyone except the humans. Professor Krell stood at the front of advanced xenobiology, his 4 eyes scanning the lecture hall with the sort of expression that suggested he smelled something unpleasant and suspected it was the student body. He was Vorthian, naturally. A species that looked like someone had taken an octopus, given it an exoskeleton, and then taught it to wear academic regalia. His tenure at the Institute spanned 47 years, during which he had perfected the art of the condescending pause and the disappointed tentacle wave. The classroom itself was a testament to alien ergonomics and the phrase good enough for government work. Seats accommodated everything from bipeds to serpentine species to that one gelatinous Glorthian who technically attended class as a sophisticated puddle. Holographic displays floated at various heights and angles to accommodate species with eyes in inconvenient locations. The air mixture was carefully balanced to keep everyone alive, if not exactly comfortable, which resulted in a permanent atmosphere that smelled like a gym locker had merged with a chemistry lab and possibly a fish market. Advanced xenobiology was considered one of the Institute's more challenging courses, primarily because Professor Krell graded with the mercy of a malfunctioning execution droid. The subject matter covered the biological systems of various galactic species, their evolutionary adaptations, their strengths, and their numerous weaknesses. Krell particularly enjoyed the weaknesses section. The students filed in with the enthusiasm of convicts approaching a sentencing hearing. There were Caldronian nobles, easily identified by their crystalline skin that refracted light into annoying patterns and their insufferable habit of announcing their titles before speaking. Several Mithari occupied the back row, their insectoid forms clicking and chittering in what passed for gossip among species with mandibles. Adrenthian sat alone, as usual, because his species' natural toxic excretions made friendship biologically inadvisable. And then there were the humans. 2 of them this semester, which was apparently the maximum number the administration felt comfortable inflicting on any single course. They sat separately, not out of animosity, but because clustering together would have looked defensive. And looking defensive was basically admitting you did not belong here. Damian Torres occupied a seat in the middle section, the classic position of someone trying to be neither too visible nor too invisible. He was tall by human standards, with dark hair that persistently refused to obey whatever product he used on it, and the kind of face that suggested he was perpetually 3 seconds away from saying something sarcastic but thought better of it. He had spent the last 4 months at the Institute learning that human degrees in xenobiology from Earth were considered roughly equivalent to what other species gave their elementary school students as participation trophies. Maya Chen sat 3 rows back and to the left, a position that gave her clear sight lines to the entire classroom and both exits. She was smaller, quieter, and had cultivated an air of such profound uninterest that most students had forgotten she was enrolled. She spent every class period taking notes on a data pad, with the sort of focused intensity usually reserved for religious experiences or high-stakes gambling. The real star of today's show, however, was Zixthor, Crown Prince of the Caldronian Imperium, first of his clutch, heir to 17 star systems, and the single most punchable sentient being Damian had ever encountered. Zixthor was, in the technical sense, beautiful. Caldronians were crystalline-based life forms who looked like someone had carved a humanoid figure from living gemstone and then given it an ego problem. Light refracted through Zixthor's body in cascading rainbows. His movements were fluid and precise, and his voice had a musical quality that would have been pleasant if not for the fact that he used it primarily to explain why everyone else was inferior. He sat in the front row, center seat, because of course he did. His entourage of lesser Caldronian nobles flanked him like decorative bookends. They laughed at his jokes, nodded at his observations, and generally behaved like the sort of people who peaked in high school, except this was university, and the behavior was somehow more pathetic. Professor Krell began the lecture with his usual preamble about the importance of understanding biological diversity, which he delivered with all the passion of someone reading a tax form. The day's topic: adaptive evolution in hostile environments. It should have been interesting. Krell managed to make it feel like watching paint dry in a gravity well. 15 minutes into the lecture, Krell mentioned Earth's evolutionary pressures as a minor footnote, the sort of aside that suggested the planet was barely worth discussing. Damian felt his jaw tighten, but said nothing. This was normal. Earth was always a footnote. Zixthor's hand rose, light dancing off his crystalline fingers. Professor Krell acknowledged him with a tentacle gesture. Of course he did. Zixthor was his favorite student, primarily because the prince had mastered the art of asking questions that were really just statements about his own intelligence. Professor, I find the inclusion of Earth in this discussion curious, Zixthor began, his voice carrying that musical lilt that made everything sound like performance. Given that human evolution produced a species with no natural armor, no enhanced sensory capabilities, no psionic potential, and a lifespan that barely qualifies as extended adolescence by civilized standards, can we truly categorize them as successfully adapted? A few students chuckled. The Mithari in the back row clicked their mandibles in what passed for applause among their kind. Damien's knuckles went white on his datapad. Krell's eye stalks swiveled toward the human section with something that might have been sympathy if he were capable of that emotion. The human evolutionary path is unconventional, yes. Mr. Torres, would you care to respond? It was not really a question. It was an invitation to public humiliation disguised as academic discourse. Damien took a breath. Human adaptation prioritized versatility over specialization. We can survive in a wider range of environments than most species without technological assistance. Our endurance capabilities exceed endurance, Zixthor interrupted, somehow making the word sound like an insult. Yes, I have read your thesis on human adaptive biology. Fascinating fiction. You argue that humans evolved as persistence predators, that your ability to simply keep moving constitutes a survival advantage. He paused for effect, light refracting off his face in a way that probably looked dramatic. Tell me, Torres, how does your persistence hunting serve you in space? Can you run down a starship? Will you jog after an enemy fleet until they surrender from exhaustion? More laughter. Even Professor Krell's tentacles quivered in what might have been amusement. Damien felt heat rising in his face. The principle demonstrates neurological and cardiovascular advantages that translate to what? Mediocrity with stamina? Zixthor stood, because apparently sitting was insufficient for maximum condescension. Humans have been in space for barely a century. Most civilized species were building Dyson spheres while your ancestors were still painting on cave walls. You bring nothing to the galactic community except enthusiasm and a disturbing willingness to eat things that would kill most species. You are the galaxy's eager but ultimately disappointing interns. The classroom fell silent. This had crossed from academic debate into something uglier. Damien stood as well, muscle memory from too many confrontations overriding common sense. You want to compare species? Let us do it properly. Formal academic debate right here, right now. My thesis on human adaptive advantages versus your obvious expertise on why Caldronians are the galaxy's gift to evolution. Professor Krell's eyes widened slightly. This was irregular. This was improper. This was also absolutely going to happen because Krell was, at his core, a drama enthusiast. A formal debate. Krell mused, tentacles tapping together. Classical format. Opening statements, rebuttals, class vote on the victor. Prince Zixthor, do you accept? Zixthor's crystalline face arranged itself into something approximating a smile. I would be honored to provide Mr. Torres with an education in rhetoric along with biology. Let us say Friday? That gives him 3 days to prepare his surrender. Friday, Damien agreed, immediately regretting everything. The next 3 days were a blur of research, coffee that other species considered mild poison, and the growing certainty that Damien had made a catastrophic mistake. He pulled every academic paper on human evolution, every comparative biology study, every scrap of data that might support his argument. It was not enough. It was never going to be enough because Zixthor was right about one thing. Humanity was new, untested, and playing catch-up with species that had millennia of academic tradition. Maya had said nothing about the upcoming debate. She continued to attend classes, take her meticulous notes, and maintain her aura of profound disinterest. Damien had tried to approach her once, thinking maybe they should present a united human front. But she had simply looked at him with dark eyes that revealed nothing and returned to her datapad. Friday arrived with the inevitability of a tax audit. The classroom was packed. Word had spread through the Institute with the speed that only gossip about potential humiliation could achieve. Students from other courses crowded in, claiming every available seat and vertical surface. Even a few professors lurked in the back, pretending they were not there to watch a massacre. Professor Krell stood at the front, practically vibrating with anticipation. Gentlemen, the format is simple. 15 minutes for opening statements, 10 minutes each for rebuttals. Then the class votes. Prince Zixthor, as the challenger, you will present first. Zixthor rose with fluid grace, light cascading off his crystalline form. He had prepared a presentation, because of course he had. Holographic displays materialized around him, showing charts, graphs, and images that would have looked more appropriate in a prosecution than a debate. Esteemed professor, fellow students, I stand before you to discuss a simple truth that should require no debate. The human species, while enthusiastic, represents the galaxy's most overestimated newcomers. His voice was smooth, confident, musical. Let us examine the evidence objectively. The first hologram showed comparative biology charts. Average lifespan. Humans, 80 Earth years if they are lucky and avoid their numerous self-destructive tendencies. Caldronians, 340 years. Vorthians, 420. Even the short-lived Mithari manage 160. In the time it takes a human to reach what they optimistically call wisdom, most of us have earned multiple advanced degrees and held several careers. Click. Next slide. Physical resilience. Humans require a remarkably narrow range of environmental conditions. Temperature variations beyond 20 degrees in either direction cause distress. They need specific atmospheric pressure, specific oxygen levels, specific everything. They are the galaxy's most high-maintenance species masquerading as adaptable. A few students laughed. Damien felt his stomach sink. Combat capability, Zixthor continued, warming to his theme. No natural weapons, no claws, no venom, no armored hide, no psionic abilities whatsoever. They compensate with tools, yes, but strip away their technology and a human is simply ambulatory meat, waiting to become part of someone else's food chain. They are prey animals who learn to hold weapons, nothing more. The holograms showed human anatomy with helpful labels pointing out weaknesses. Soft skin, vulnerable joints, single heart, fragile skeletal structure. It was clinically devastating. And, yet, Zixthor said, his voice dropping into something approximating pity. Humans insist they belong at this institution, learning alongside species who evolved beyond such limitations millennia ago. They write papers about persistence and adaptability while ignoring that true advancement means transcending the need for such primitive survival traits. He gestured at Damien. My colleague wishes to argue that human versatility compensates for their numerous deficiencies. But versatility is simply a euphemism for being mediocre at everything rather than excellent at anything. Humans are the galaxy's generalists in a universe that rewards specialization. They are the student who passes every class with average marks and wonders why they do not receive honors. More laughter. Damien noticed even some of the professors were nodding. In conclusion, Zixthor said, light refracting off him in triumphant patterns. Humanity is welcome in the galactic community as enthusiastic participants and occasionally entertaining companions. But let us not confuse inclusion with equality. They have potential, perhaps, in another few thousand years of evolution. For now, they are simply the children at the adult table, and we should treat them with appropriate patience. He sat down to actual applause. Actual applause. Damien wanted to crawl under his desk and stay there until the heat death of the universe. Professor Krell gestured at Damien with a tentacle. Mr. Torres, your opening statement. Damien stood on shaking legs. He had prepared notes. He had prepared arguments. All of them suddenly seemed pathetically inadequate. He pulled up his own presentation, charts about human endurance, about cognitive flexibility, about innovative capacity. It all looked like exactly what Zixthor had said it was. The desperate justifications of a species trying to prove it belonged. He spoke for his allotted 15 minutes. He made his points about adaptability and problem-solving, and the fact that humans had gone from atmospheric flight to interstellar travel in less than 2 centuries. He cited studies and data and theories. Nobody was convinced. He could see it in their faces, their tentacles, their antennae. Even the humans in the audience. There were apparently 4 others scattered throughout the crowd. Looked embarrassed for him. Zixthor's rebuttal was surgical. Every point Damien made, the Caldronian prince countered with a superior alien example. Humans had good endurance. Drenthians could run for days without stopping. Humans were innovative. The Keltharians had developed quantum computing while humans were still banging rocks together. Humans were adaptable. Every species was adaptable. That was how evolution worked. By the time Damien sat down for his own rebuttal period, he knew he had lost. The class knew he had lost. Zixthor knew he had lost and was enjoying himself immensely. Professor Krell was opening his mouth to call the debate concluded when a hand rose from 3 rows back. Maya Chen, who had not spoken in class once during the entire semester, had her hand up. The classroom fell silent with the confusion of an audience watching a plot twist nobody saw coming. Krell's eye stalks swiveled. Miss Chen, this is somewhat irregular, but given the circumstances, yes. Maya stood. She was small, especially compared to most species in the room, wearing the sort of practical clothes that suggested she prioritized function over appearance. Her datapad was in her hands. She had not prepared a holographic presentation. She had not prepared anything except that datapad and an expression of calm that somehow felt more dangerous than any amount of anger. I have a question for Prince Zixthor, she said quietly. Zixthor waved magnanimously. Of course. Though the debate is effectively concluded, I am happy to indulge. Your thesis on Caldronian neural plasticity from last semester, Maya interrupted, her voice still quiet but somehow cutting through his. The one published in the Journal of Comparative Neurology. Sections 3 through 7. Can you explain the methodology? Zixthor blinked, light stuttering across his features. That is hardly relevant to the methodology, Maya repeated. Specifically the experimental design for measuring crystalline thought process formation in high-stress environments. I fail to see how this, you copied it. Maya's voice remained level. From a paper published 3 years earlier by Dr. Venthrall of the Crystalline Collective. I checked. You changed some terminology and rearranged 2 paragraphs. The statistical analysis is identical down to the decimal points. That is not parallel thinking. That is plagiarism. The classroom went very, very quiet. Zixthor's crystalline face shifted through several colors. That is a serious accusation. Your paper on adaptive camouflage in silicon-based life forms from 2 semesters ago, Maya continued, scrolling through her datapad. 73% similarity to a dissertation from Keltharian University. Your analysis of energy-efficient space travel last year borrowed heavily from Vorthian military research without citation. Should I continue? Professor Krell's tentacles had gone rigid. Miss Chen, these are extraordinary claims. I have the documentation. Maya tapped her datapad. I can forward it to you right now if you'd like. Every source, every similarity, every instance where the prince presented others' work as his own. I started cataloging them during orientation week. Several students gasped. The Caldronian nobles flanking Zixthor had suddenly found the floor very interesting. This is preposterous, Zixthor said, but his voice had lost its musical quality. Why would you even? Because you were a threat, Maya said simply. She turned to address the entire classroom, her quiet voice somehow carrying to every corner. Not Prince Zixthor specifically, all of you, every species here spent the first week explaining why humans did not belong. So I decided to learn why you thought you were better. She pulled up her own holograms now, not charts about human superiority, detailed biological analysis of every species in the classroom. Caldronians, she said, gesturing to the crystalline species. Beautiful, long-lived, excellent memory. Also, your crystalline structure makes you vulnerable to specific resonant frequencies. Your hearing range is narrow. Your reproduction rate is incredibly slow. Your caloric requirements are 3 times human baseline, making you logistically expensive in resource-limited environments. She smiled slightly. I worked out 7 different ways to incapacitate a Caldronian using tools available in this classroom alone. Zixthor looked like he was about to shatter. Maya continued, scrolling through species. Vorthians, 4 brains, impressive cognitive ability, complete vulnerability to electromagnetic pulses because your neural network is partially crystalline. Methari, hive mind coordination, interesting social structure, complete psychological collapse if isolated from the collective for more than 4 days. Drenthians, toxic secretions, impressive physical resilience, allergic to 23 common industrial compounds, including the lubricant used in standard airlock doors. She looked around the classroom. Should I continue? I have files on all of you. Biological weaknesses, psychological pressure points, species-specific vulnerabilities. 4 months of notes. Detailed, thorough, cross-referenced with every academic database I could access. The silence in the room had evolved from shocked to terrified. The thing about humans, Maya said softly, is that you are all correct. We are not the strongest. We are not the fastest. We do not have natural weapons or armor or psionic abilities. What we have is pattern recognition, threat assessment, the ability to observe, analyze, and prepare. She looked directly at Zixthor. You called us prey animals who learned to hold weapons. You are right. Do you know what prey animals are excellent at? Not dying. We spent millions of years at the bottom of the food chain, and we survived by being smarter, more careful, and more vicious than everything trying to eat us. We watch. We learn. We adapt. And when something threatens us, we do not engage in honorable combat. We find its weakness and exploit it without mercy. Maya held up her datapad. Every species in this room has been treating humans like we are harmless, stupid, or both. You have been having your academic debates and your social hierarchies and your demonstrations of superiority while we have been taking notes. Learning your languages, your customs, your biology, your weaknesses. You thought you were teaching us our place. We were conducting reconnaissance. She turned to Professor Krell. You asked about human adaptive advantages. Here is one. We are paranoid, survival instinct, honed over millennia of being something else's dinner. We assume everything is a threat until proven otherwise. We prepare for worst-case scenarios. We watch our backs and everyone else's fronts. Maya gestured around the room. In 4 months, I have compiled enough data on every species represented here to write comprehensive tactical assessments. I know what you eat, what you fear, what hurts you, what you need to survive. I know your social structures, your hierarchies, your political tensions. I have been a model student, quiet and attentive, and you all forgot I was dangerous because I am small and polite. She looked at Zixthor again. You wanted to humiliate humanity? To prove we do not belong here? Congratulations! You picked a fight with a species whose primary survival trait is holding grudges and preparing contingencies. You gave a presentation about human weakness and displayed your anatomy in perfect detail while making broad gestures. I now have complete mapping of Caldronian physiology, including the location of your primary neural cluster, which you helpfully kept exposing while you were being dramatic. The Caldronian prince had gone completely still. Maya sat down. I am not saying humans are superior. I am saying we are dangerous, and there is a difference. We did not evolve to be the strongest predators. We evolved to kill the strongest predators using nothing but spite and planning. That is what you are all dealing with. That is what you invited into your civilized academic institution. Not warriors, not diplomats, survivors who learn to smile while taking notes. She looked at her datapad one more time. Also, Prince Zixthor, your thesis on post-scarcity economics from 3 semesters ago, copied from a Terran paper published on Earth 6 years ago. You plagiarized from the species you claim is intellectually inferior. That feels important to mention. The classroom had no sound except for environmental systems. Even those seemed to be holding their breath. Professor Krell's tentacles moved spastically. This is highly irregular. Miss Chen, your accusations regarding academic dishonesty will need to be formally investigated. Prince Zixthor, you will need to meet with the Academic Integrity Committee. I am calling this debate concluded. Students filed out in silence. The usual chatter was gone. They gave Damien and Maya a wider berth than usual, the kind of space you give something that turned out to be more dangerous than it looked. Damien approached Maya outside the classroom. You had all that prepared? The entire time? Maya shrugged. I had it prepared since orientation. Different versions for different scenarios. That was Draft 7, Public Humiliation in Academic Setting. Draft 7, Damien repeated. How many drafts were there? 23, covering social confrontation, physical altercation, political maneuvering, and various combinations thereof. The nice thing about being underestimated is that you have time to prepare while everyone is busy underestimating you. You are terrifying, Damien said. I am careful, Maya corrected. There is a difference. This entire institute is populated with species who think they are apex predators because they got to space first. They forgot that humanity spent our entire evolutionary history being hunted by actual apex predators, and we murdered every single one of them. We are not strong or fast or long-lived. We are methodical, patient, and we hold grudges until the heat death of the universe. She looked at him. You were trying to win a debate on their terms, using their rules, playing their game. That is not how humans win, Damien. We change the game. We flip the table. We smile and nod and take notes. And when they are convinced they have won, we remind them that friendly does not mean harmless. Damien laughed despite himself. You have been planning this since day one? Since before day one. Since I read about the Institute and realized I would be surrounded by species with superiority complexes, I prepared. That seems exhausting. It is practical. Earth is vulnerable right now. 15 years in space is nothing. We are surrounded by civilizations that could sterilize our planet without breathing hard. The only thing keeping us alive is the assumption that we are too primitive to be a threat. I intend to maintain that assumption while simultaneously ensuring that if anyone tests it, they realize their mistake too late. Maya started walking. You should write better theses, by the way. Your work on adaptive biology was solid, but your rhetoric needs work. Humans did not survive by being good at debates. We survived by being good at violence and pretending we were not. She disappeared into the crowd of students, leaving Damien standing there with a distinct feeling that humanity's position in the galaxy was more complicated than he had realized. Over the next few weeks, the atmosphere at the Institute shifted. Students were more careful around the human contingent. Professors were more respectful. The casual dismissal stopped, replaced by a cautious wariness that was somehow more satisfying than respect. Prince Zixthor, after an investigation that was remarkably swift considering his royal status, was placed on academic probation and required to retake several courses. His entourage dispersed. He sat alone in classes now, quiet and careful, his crystalline light dimmer than before. Maya continued taking her notes. Damien learned to appreciate the value of having someone watching his back who treated survival as a full-time occupation. Other human students began arriving at the Institute, and they found an environment that was suspicious rather than dismissive, which was an improvement. Professor Krell, in a private moment of uncharacteristic honesty, admitted to Damien that the human exchange program had been more educational than anticipated, though not in the ways the administration had intended. Humans, it turned out, did not need to be the strongest or the smartest. They just needed to be observant, patient, and willing to weaponize information at the optimal moment. The galaxy had invited humanity to the table, assuming they were adopting primitive cousins who needed guidance and education. What they had actually invited was a species that spent millions of years learning how to kill things bigger, stronger, and better armed than themselves, using nothing but planning and persistence. They had invited survivors who smiled while cataloging weaknesses. They had invited prey animals who became apex predators through sheer bloody-minded refusal to die. Humanity was not the galaxy's strongest species. They were not the smartest or the fastest or the longest lived. What they were, the rest of the galaxy was slowly realizing, was patient, observant, methodical, and absolutely willing to hold grudges across geological timescales while smiling and taking notes. The Galactic Scholastic Institute continued its mission of fostering understanding between species, though now that understanding included the knowledge that sometimes the friendly ones were the ones you needed to watch most carefully. The human students remained polite, eager to learn, and absolutely meticulous about documentation. And somewhere in the Institute's databases, Maya Chen's files continued to grow, cross-referenced and updated, a comprehensive catalog of useful information about every species humanity might one day need to negotiate with, defend against, or, in a worst-case scenario, decisively defeat. Because that was what humans did. They prepared. They adapted. They survived. And they never, ever forgot who picked the first fight. Zixthor learned that lesson in a classroom. The rest of the galaxy was still figuring it out, one careful human smile at a time.